if you're ready, we're going to go ahead and start the meeting.
Yes.
All right. So we are going to call to order and do a roll call. Commissioner Kai?
Present.
Commissioner Widola?
Present.
Commissioner Giles?
Present.
Commissioner Harsh?
Present.
Commissioner Bance?
Present.
And let the record show that Commissioner Simpson is here and Commissioner Brown is absent at this time. All right. Our first item on the consent agenda is the approval of 8 sets of Planning Commission minutes. There are 7 work session minutes and 1 hearing meeting minutes. I have one. I've turned in Scrivener errors to Erica prior to the meeting, and I have one substantive change that I would ask the commission to consider before we vote on the consent agenda. On page 4 of our packet, under the first paragraph, the last sentence says no planning commissioner responded. And because we're doing electronic hearings now, I wanted to have clarity in our written record that we took a roll call vote and that all commissioners present responded with a no ex parte contact reply, and that the applicant responded that he had no concern. Let me get the language. No challenge to any planning commissioner member's ability to participate. So that's the modification I would have to those sets of the hearing minutes to provide clarity.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but I also wasn't at those meetings, I think. So.
And we.
Do we need to make a movement? Do we need to move for a vote on that, on the accept change?
You can either do one motion to accept the change or a motion to move the minutes as
Amended.
With edits.
Yes, with the amendments. Either way, either how you want to make the motion.
Are there any other comments or edits on the announcements or on the agendas?
This is Commissioner Giles. I wasn't sure what the protocol was for voting to approve them when I was not a member of the commission at the time of the meeting. Is that all right? I assume.
That is all right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, well then I'd like to move that we accept the minutes with the edits as laid out by Chair Simpson.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the minutes on the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. Vice Chair Kai?
Yay.
Commissioner Widola?
Yay.
Commissioner Giles?
Yes.
Commissioner Harsh?
Yes.
Commissioner Bance?
Yay.
And Commissioner Simpson, yes. All right, moving on to council liaison announcements. Councilor Scott?
Pretty brief today. So the council did not have a regular meeting last Tuesday, but we did have a work session. There was 2 topics. The first one was getting a legislative update from our legislative consultants in Salem. Kind of talking a little bit, kind of laying the groundwork for the upcoming, full legislative session, and talking a little bit about what some of the, the hot items are going to be down in Salem, and then kind of what our priorities are as far as, trying to affect that legislation in one direction or the other. So it was a good presentation. I think we spent probably about an hour and a half on that topic. You can watch it online on our YouTube channel, the city's YouTube channel. The second topic was a kind of a fairly last minute ad, but it was a discussion around extending the alfresco dining. As many are aware, when that was originally implemented back in the spring, it had an original end date of shortly after Labor Day. This is by city manager decree. or decision. It's not a council, so it wasn't anything council voted on or council decided. But obviously, city manager always seeks our input. So originally it had an end date, predetermined end date of shortly after Labor Day. It was extended previously through Halloween, through the end of this month. And then we got some fairly recent interest in extending it further. So we kind of had a quick discussion around that. I think the consensus all around was the council is definitely in favor of it being extended. So there was, at the time when we had the discussion a week ago, the gating item is a state fire code that prohibits tents being in place for more than 180 days in a calendar year. And that 180-day limit was going to hit, or is going to hit, on November 27th. So 30 days from 31 days, I guess, from today. So shortly after we met last week, the city manager decided that he would extend the al fresco dining through November 27th, the latest date allowed by state fire code. And then we were going to continue to work, behind the city was going to continue to work with TDFNR and state fire marshals and all the other, legislative bodies that need to be involved to look at options for, getting an exception to that rule. It has since come to be that there is an exception that's been put in place. So the 180-day state fire code no longer is the gating item. So I think I have not heard that it has yet been extended past November 27th. So, but that is an option now on the table for the city. Should any of the vendors or any of the establishments wish to ask to have it extended longer, then we can look at that. So that was my long update. I guess I was more not as brief as I thought. Next week, we do not have a city council meeting at our regularly scheduled time. It is election day, so we did not have a huge agenda planned. So we pushed that agenda to the following council meeting, which would be November 17th. Will be the next city council meeting, and everyone can enjoy watching the election returns pour in, I suppose.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the update, and thank you for the clarity on the al fresco dining. It is really important to our community. So
yeah,
the
absolutely.
details were very appreciated. So
You're welcome.
I actually have a question about the al fresco dining. Has there been any desire from any of the restaurants to make it a permanent fixture, to make that I know that there was Rainbow Market and a couple of others that still like the road traffic, and there's of course the TriMet bus issues, but what has the feedback been from the restaurants to making it permanent?
So, I mean, I could give you my input on that, and then if Julie and Erica want to jump in, I'd certainly let them. I think even pre-COVID, I have personally been involved in a couple of conversations around the idea of having a permanent, kind of restructuring of downtown to allow for more plaza and kind of open air spaces. But nothing that's gone, super far down the road as far as discussions. But throughout the COVID period, that has come up a couple of times, both, I think in conversations with business owners in Old Town, as well as, kind of here and there. I think that really the conversation has been, let's focus on COVID, figure out how we navigate these times. And then once we return to whatever the new normal is going to be beyond COVID, then, those are conversations, we can start picking up and having at that time. As you mentioned, there's a lot more to it than just closing a street and moving on with our day. So I think it's a complicated issue, but I think there is enough interest that it's probably going to warrant a future discussion, but nothing substantial, I think, has happened yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have absolutely nothing to add. That was perfectly stated by Councilor Scott.
excellent. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to staff announcements.
Sorry, Dean, I just have one quick question on that. Councilor Scott, is there something that's being done about the Metro buses? Are they looking at potentially rerouting them so that they don't go through Old Town, or what are they doing right now?
That's an excellent question. I don't have a lot of updates, but I can tell you that I know TriMet is looking already at some changes to their bus routes in Sherwood. I don't know specifically what those are. I think there's an open house this week that may talk a little bit about that. But beyond that, I think, it's actually one of the things the mayor has asked me to start looking into with TriMet around, a more permanent. I think there's several things on the table that I think there's interested in. And obviously all of this will be subject to, the normal council hearings and meetings and public discussion, of course. But I think there's interest in relocating the park and ride, which is very inconveniently located at the far back of Old Town, maybe to a more commercial or industrial location. I think there's there's interest among some in potentially rerouting buses so that maybe we service some of the shopping areas of town as well as the Old Town core. So again, very, very early, but I think this is, I think, kind of bubbled up to the surface that we needed to have some long-term planning around the future of transit in Sherwood and how that should look given, how Sherwood has changed over the last 10 years. So I think those are things that, again, will probably start, forming and taking shape, and it's going to be a lengthy process to get to whatever the end state will be. But I think those things will start heating up a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully at minimum they'll be able to rethink up a better route through Old Town that at least works works better for the buses to be able to navigate at the very minimum.
So I will say that, currently with the Alfresco, they've had to detour, and basically they turn down, I believe it's First Street, and go through that little parabout just past City Hall. And from what I hear, the bus drivers really, really like that. They like not having to navigate through Old Town. And so I know TriMet is definitely wanting to have conversations with us as well. I think, there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a better option where they're just coming on the fringe of Old Town and it's still servicing Old Town, but it's not having to navigate through the smaller streets and everything. So.
Excellent. All right. Staff announcements. Erica?
Great. So our first announcement has to do with the comprehensive plan update. Tomorrow, the CAC, our Community Advisory Committee, is meeting. That information agenda is posted on the city's website. They are kicking off the infrastructure comprehensive theme block, which takes a look at sewer, water, transportation, broadband facilities in Sherwood. So we're going to be having a conversation about all of our utilities in Sherwood with our Community Advisory Committee tomorrow and our Technical Advisory Committee earlier in the afternoon as well. Next month, Planning Commission and City Council on November 17th, you'll be having a joint meeting to review our housing theme, final draft of our goals and policies for our housing block. So I think that wraps up the comprehensive plan update. I do want to touch on our residential housing code update, which has been a project that internally, as staff and with our project consultants, we have kicked off. And this project is moving, but it's moving, in the background. Nothing has come to Planning Commission yet, but you'll be seeing something in December about this project. We are we're just about going out, and we're going to be doing some stakeholder interviews in November, and we're going to be reaching out to a couple planning commissioners and city council members as well, to have an interview and to talk about, once again, residential housing in Sherwood. I know we've had many conversations about housing in Sherwood over the past couple months, but it's really getting your input and feedback, on issues and certain topic areas, from design standards to, how we process, resident, housing in Sherwood through the land review process. I think that's it for now.
So back to the first one real quickly. What was the date of that joint meeting?
November 17th.
So prior to the next council meeting.
So council is not meeting on November 2nd, 3rd. Yes, 3rd.
So it's their next meeting as our
It's
work
their
session.
next- Correct.
At what time?
I will get back to you about when that joint meeting will be.
Okay. And then on the residential housing update, if you're going to stakeholders, have you produced the list yet or asking for volunteers for surveys, or how is that working?
So we have developed a list of stakeholders that we're going to be reaching out to. And they're, we're going to be talking to counselors, planning commissioners, housing nonprofits, housing developers here in Sherwood, larger housing developers, as well as, developers that, are smaller in nature. They might do a little 2-lot partition here and there. To get their different perspectives on, process, and as well as, standards for design and parking. Okay. On all the different types of housing choices that are out there. Not just single family, detached residential.
Okay. All right. Moving on to community comments. Community comments have to be submitted 24 hours in advance to be read into the record. Did we receive any community comments prior to the meeting?
We have not received any.
Okay, so we're moving on to new business. And our first new business item is a public hearing. And I have a new script to read now. Let's see where this, I'm gonna, okay. LU, okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, all right. The public hearing on LU 2020-018 PA recommendation to adopt housing needs analysis 2019 to 2039 is called to order. To maintain compliance with public meeting laws and pursuant to House Bill 4212, this meeting is being conducted electronically. The public notices for this meeting stated that citizen comments and testimony for this public hearing item had to be submitted in writing at least 24 hours in advance in order to be included in the record. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present the staff report, questions, if any, by the hearing body for staff. We will then open the public hearing for testimony, and the time will be limited as follows. The applicants will have 30 minutes split between presentation and rebuttal. As previously noted, public testimony for this hearing was required to be submitted in advance in writing. Staff will read the first 4 minutes of comments received. The full text of the comments, if any, have been provided to the hearings body and the applicant in advance of this hearing, and will be included in the record. The rebuttal from the applicant is the remainder of their 30 minutes. Final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the commission. We will then close the public hearing, and no other comments will be heard from the public or the applicant, followed by discussion and deliberation by the commission. This is a legislative decision, and the Planning Commission's role in this decision is a recommendation for action by the City Council. And the hearing at the City Council will be de novo, so members of the community can testify at that hearing also. A decision may be made by the Planning Commission at the close of the hearing, or the matter may be continued to a time and date certain. If the matter is continued to a date certain, this will be the only notice of that date you receive. Please note, failure to raise an issue with enough detail to enable the commission, the applicant, and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an appeal to City Council or the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Also, failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues regarding proposed conditions of approval, again with enough detail to allow the commission to respond to the issue, precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Erica, is there a potential conflict, bias, or ex parte disclosure required?
For a legislative hearing, no.
Okay, I thought so. So I'm gonna skip next paragraph. And the following question. All right, onward. So our first item is the planning staff will now present the staff report.
Let me share my screen here. Ooh, where are you? There we are. And I'm assuming everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, great. Good evening, commissioners. So tonight before you is Sherwood's housing needs analysis from 2019 to 2039. The housing needs analysis is a technical policy document, and it's a document that will help guide future discussions on residential development in Sherwood. It'll help us answer questions such as where should growth occur in Sherwood, what types of housing types are needed in the community, and what other programs or regulatory tools should the city review and consider when promoting needed housing. So the H&A provides a housing needs projection over a 20-year planning period based on local population and housing needs. We have to provide an H&A under State Land Use Goal 10, which is housing. And we have Sherwood, the community has 3 primary obligations. We need to designate land in a way that 50% of new housing is single family attached. And the other 50% can be either attached housing, townhomes or duplexes, and multifamily. We also need to provide opportunities for development of needed housing types, and needed housing types are considered, single family detached, single family attached, multiple family housing, as well as government assisted housing, and other types of housing. We also need to provide for opportunities to achieve an average dwelling density of 6 units per net acre through our zoning designations in the city's development code. So basically, in a nutshell, and I know you've seen this slide before during our work session, and I just want to read it again. So the State Land Use Goal 10 housing, it requires the city to maintain and plan for an adequate land supply to accommodate at least 20 years of future housing growth, providing flexibility of housing location, housing types, and density, and to ensure the availability of prices of housing units are corresponding with the financial needs of households in Oregon and Sherwood residents.
Hey, Erica.
Yes.
There was just a question on the way that it was phrased is the 6 units per acre. You said it was due to our city code, but I was under the understanding that was a state.
So that is required by the state that we need to produce a maximum or overall density of 6 units per acre, but we do that through our minimum and maximum or minimum density requirements in our code. Great question. So the housing needs analysis that is in your packet, it's really broken up into 3 chapters. We're looking at historical and recent development trends. We're looking at housing needs in Sherwood, and then we do an analysis of our residential land sufficiency. Just to go over just some quick information about Sherwood residential housing trends. So single family housing accounts for 75% of Sherwood's housing stock today, and single family attached housing accounts for 8%, and multifamily accounts for roughly 18%. Nearly 3/4 of Sherwood residents own their own homes. However, over the past 10 years, there's been a slight decline in home ownership rates throughout the community. The average density in Sherwood is 8.2 dwelling units per net acre. And that was over the that was between 2000 to the 2014 planning period. And a lot of this information is really found on pages 9 through 11 of the H&A document. So a little bit about our characteristics of the Sherwood population. As many of you have known, the population here in Sherwood has grown relatively fast since the mid-1990s. The population here in Sherwood is aging. Sherwood, we're attracting younger people and more households with children. We have a larger household size than the average household size in the state of Oregon. Our population is becoming more ethnically diverse. We have a growing Latino population. And then most people working at businesses in Sherwood do not live in Sherwood. And a lot of this socioeconomic data can be found in the appendix of the H&A document and also on pages 18 through 20. So factors that affect housing choice. There are many demographic and socioeconomic variables that affect housing choices. And housing market research finds that age, size of the household, and income are most strongly correlated with housing choice. Households make different housing choices at different stages of life, as this graphic depicts. Younger and older people are more likely to live in single-person households, while people in their middle age years are likely to have families with children. And income is probably the most important determinant of housing choice that we see. So you can see in this graphic, you start off in a family environment. You are single. You might be living in an apartment or a condo. Then you might find a significant other, and you might expand into a townhouse or different kind of housing, and then you might start a family and end up in a single detached family home. And then as you grow older, you might end up in a multifamily housing situation. So local and regional trends in housing costs. So households in Sherwood, we generally have a higher than average income, and housing prices are typically higher than the average. And we've seen housing prices continue to grow over the past several years. More than 1/3 of Sherwood households have housing affordability problems. And this really means that the household pays more than 30% of their gross income on housing cost, which includes mortgage, rent, utilities, and insurance. But this number is very similar to the regional averages in the region. When considering transportation, the average household in Sherwood spends 54% of its income on housing and transportation costs, which is just slightly higher than the surrounding communities of Tigard and Wilsonville and Tualatin. But we do know that most people do travel out of the city for employment. What does this really mean? Well, future housing affordability will depend on the relationship, between income and housing prices. Determining whether housing in Sherwood will be more or less affordable is really difficult to answer when we look at the historical data that's presented to us in the H&A. But really the key questions that we should be thinking about is whether Housing prices will continue to outpace people's income and people's income growth, and whether transportation costs will continue to grow into the future. So projected housing growth in Sherwood. So we have an extrapolated forecast, and we used Metro's forecast model for determining Sherwood's planning for our growth in Sherwood. And over the next 20 years, you can see here that Sherwood will grow by 700 households within the city limits. In the Brookman area, we're looking at a little bit over 1,000 households. And if you include the city limits and our urban growth area of Brookman, we can see that we have a forecast that Sherwood will grow, 1,729 households between 2019 and 2039. So this table really forecasts the needed housing units by mix in this planning period. We can see here that when it's broken down, we have 865 new dwelling units that will be single family detached. And then we have split up the attached and multifamily housing by 25%, which gives us an equal number of 432 households for single family attached housing and multifamily housing, for a total of 1,729 household units, which we are expected to grow by. I shouldn't say expected, but forecasted to grow by. There's the big difference. So what does this all mean? Some implications of this demographic and socioeconomic trends on housing choices. And this is the first bullet here is just a given. Growth in housing will be driven by growth in population. On average, our future housing in Sherwood will look a lot like the past housing, the housing that's already here. If housing changes in the future, it is more likely to move in the direction of smaller units and more diverse housing types. And I just really want to emphasize that I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't think anybody does. And this document is just to really get an idea about the future, so policy choices can be made today. So we're just extrapolating a lot of data and making assumptions. So in some of these assumptions and implications, we know that growth in older households will result in more one-person households, and there could be a demand for smaller units for ownership and rental opportunities. We are seeing a growth in millennial households with families, and that could result in a demand for more affordable units for ownership and rental. As incomes in millennial households really haven't increased dramatically over the past, couple of years. And the forecast also shows a range of housing types needed in Sherwood. And I'm just going to go quickly over those housing types because I know that we've all seen these housing types before. We might see additional cottage clusters, duplexes, townhouses, courtyard housing, small multiplex developments, mixed use multifamily housing. We could see small lot single family detached housing as Sherwood grows. So those are our different housing types that we could possibly see more of in the future. So the third section of the H&A is our billable residential land analysis. And really, oops, sorry, I want to go back. what this really looks at the capacity of development based on vacant residential land to accommodate new housing in Sherwood. We look at it through a range of density assumptions by the city's zoning designations. And the building lands inventory identified 175 net acres of vacant and partially vacant land in Sherwood, with 96 acres within the city boundary and 79 acres in Brookman and other areas of other growth areas in Sherwood in the UGB. So I'm going to go over just a couple tables here. I know this is a big table. So this table looked at Sherwood's residential land capacity based on the maximum densities in our zoning code and our minimum lot sizes. This table shows that Sherwood's amount of buildable land for residential development has capacity to accommodate 1,500 new dwelling units under these assumptions, and that overall, we could see an average of 8.6 dwelling units per acre, and about 44% of Sherwood's development capacity is in the Brookman area. This table also looked at Sherwood's historical development densities. And our historical densities are really how Sherwood has actually been developing over the past couple years. So based on our historical development densities, Sherwood's buildable land has capacity to accommodate 1,286 new dwelling units. And this estimate results in an overall average of 7.3 dwelling units per net acre. So this table really demonstrates that development in Sherwood has occurred at higher densities than the minimum allowable densities in each zone. And based on this analysis, based on this analysis within this table, we know that Sherwood is providing more than 6 dwelling units per net buildable acre, and we are meeting the state requirements. We are ranging anywhere between 7.3 to 8.6 units per acre, meeting the state requirement of our having an overall average density of 6 units per acre. I haven't provided this table in this presentation, but if you were to look at table B3 in the appendix, you will see that between the year of 2000 and 2014, Sherwood's residential density per acre for all housing types was 8.3 dwelling units per acre. That was that table, table B3 in the appendix. I included that in our last presentation about the housing needs analysis in August. So the last step of the H&A analysis is a comparison of our capacity of residential units by zone with the demand of housing, by zone based on our development densities. So this table shows that Sherwood has actually a deficit of capacity in each zone for a total deficit of 608 dwelling units for the 20-year planning period. The largest deficits are in the medium density residential low, medium density residential high, and the high density residential zones. So what does this all mean? So this means that in order to comply with Goal 10, the city will either need to change its policies to allow for more development on the inventory of residential vacant land that we have within our zoning designations, or we need to request a UGB expansion from Metro at some point in the future, or maybe we do a combination of both. Some additional conclusions from the H&A. Sherwood is able to meet the state requirements. We can provide the opportunity for 50% of new housing to be single family attached or multifamily. And we also meet the density requirements within the mix of new housing in Sherwood. And we, as a community, we need to plan for all types of housing for all income levels. And then once again, Sherwood has a slight deficit of land for housing. We also know that existing neighborhoods built since 1990 are unlikely to redevelop or infill during this planning period. And then Sherwood has a limited supply of land for moderate and high density housing. I sent this out yesterday to all commissioners. I did make a correction within our H&A document. So on page 30, we removed the Crown Court Manufactured Home Park, which was actually not within the Sherwood planning boundary. And then we also, on page B35 of the appendix, we removed the Crown Court and updated the data in that table to reflect this change. So with that, we did not receive any public comments on the H&A. And just as we move into the future here, this H&A will be used to update the housing element and the city's comprehensive plan. And our staff recommendation is based on the review of the code provisions. Staff finds that the plan amendment is consistent with the applicable code criteria, and therefore we are recommending that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval of the housing needs analysis for the planning period of 2019 through 2039 to the Sherwood City Council. And with that, I can answer any questions.
All right, Commissioner Giles, you have a question?
Yeah, on the corrected version that I received at least, and you may have done it again since then, but on my B35 on table B, even though you crossed out the title at the top, I still see Crown Court in the table on the top part of it.
Does it have a red line?
It does not. It
Okay.
says, so you've crossed out, in fact, I'm not sure that you crossed out the right thing. So it says table B, 13 inventory of mobile manufactured home park, City of Sherwood 2014, and that's crossed out. And then, but then underneath that, it says Carriage Park Estates, then Crown Court. So this is on page B35.
Okay.
And you may have fixed it since then. It's just the version that I have in my inbox, the most recent, is the one that I still see that on. I can take a screenshot of it if you want.
No, did you, by any chance, did you get the email yesterday that showed the track change version?
This was 10:26 at 10 a.m. So.
Oh, yeah, that should be it. I'll take a look and we'll definitely fix that.
Okay.
We'll make that correction.
Yeah, you corrected it on the written part that's on page, I don't know, it says 30, I think. And then it's just on the table part of it. Just look on the second line of text on that.
And that's what I see, Erica. I didn't. The table's repeated, so it looks like you tried to delete the table, but it didn't go away. We got
right, and it doesn't go, and that table doesn't go away in track changes. I know it's.
You and I had the conversation. I was fighting with track changes earlier today, so.
Right.
Okay, I see what is being done. The thing that is crossed out at the top applies to that whole top thing. It's just confused. I've never seen it do that, so I get it now.
Yeah, Word is not behaving well in this case. All right. Any other question before we move on to Commissioner Widola? Oh, there we go. Commissioner Widola, you had a question, and you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I've got a very minor question on packet page number 58 on the percentages of the residential development trends. It adds up to 101%. And so I don't know if it's important or not, but it just, for me, it drives me crazy. When you look at the 75%, 8 and 18.
What package page number?
Packet page number 58.
58.
And that was also in your presentation today. They did add up to 101.
I like going above and beyond, but I want to make sure our rounding is proper.
I'll take a look at that, and that might have just been a problem in our Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay, Commissioner Kai.
Yeah, I had two small questions. On packet page number 44, where it talks about Sherwood's population is becoming more ethnically diverse. Do we have any additional data on additional ethnicities on that information? It's a funny statement to me because it talks about ethnic diversity, but we only talk about one ethnicity. And I was just wondering if there was more information along with that.
I don't have any additional. The H&A doesn't provide any additional information on that. Yeah. But recently, I've updated the city's website with additional information from the census. And I could definitely take a look at our census information and do a little comparative analysis.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if there's anything notable to additionally include, I think that would help the H&A a little bit in that spot. And then also on packet page number 46, the third bullet point down, more than 1/3 of Sherwood's households are cost burdened. Could we just put in there, so 38% of Sherwood's households were cost burdened, i.e. paid more than 30% of their income on rent or home ownership costs. That's defined by HUD, correct?
That is, hold on 1 second here. Let me find it.
In the packet on page 74, go ahead.
Oh, wait. Okay, let's see.
On page 74, it talks about it again, but it doesn't cite the source on that page either.
So when we are talking, so on page 78 of the packet, when we're looking at the estimate of new dwelling units by income level for the planning period, and you see that table 4, that segment of income for the market segment of income, is based on the entire metro region of a median family income of $69,400, which is put out. It's consistent with the HUD income level categories. So if you look at that second paragraph on packet page 78, which is page 29 of the housing needs analysis. It says the analysis in table 4 is based on the American Community Survey data about income levels in Sherwood using information that is categorized into market segments consistent with HUD income level categories for the region.
But as far as who defines what is cost burdened, that's according to HUD's definition, correct?
So what is according to, if you look at the income segments in this table, that is the definition of HUD standards. So if you're making 120% or more of the median family income, you're in, you know, the higher income range bracket. When we're just looking at what's the 30% of households that are if you're just looking at the 30% number for housing households that are cost burdened, that 30% number, I'm trying to, let's see here.
All I'm getting at is that for someone who's not familiar with all of this information and language, you know, they might look at that and be curious, like they might question that 30% benchmark. And I just thought it would be helpful for us to include in there as defined by HUD, just so that people who might be reading this don't think that we're just pulling some number out, you know, out of nowhere, just for the sake of clarity. So
okay,
that's all I'm getting at.
Okay.
So, and then for clarity, the chart that you pointed to, Erica, the 120% or more, that doesn't equal 38%.
No, I'm just talking, so on table 4, so it's divided by market segments for the Portland region based on income, and those income brackets.
Oh, this is the fourth.
I know are developed by HUD. The 30% number for housing affordability, of what constitutes that 30% number. I need to find, I don't know if it's necessarily if that number is coming from HUD or if it came from the census or data from Echo Northwest.
Okay, because table 4 in the paragraph above it says, based on Sherwood's current household income distribution, table 4 shows that 31% of households in Sherwood have incomes below 80%.
And that's correct. So if you look at the lower middle,
right, and we're saying 30
and the very low.
And how does that relate? There's no direct correlation to that, to the 38% of Sherwood's household are cost burdened.
That's cost burdened. No.
They're not correlating. Okay. But I would agree with Commissioner Kai's comment that providing clarity where that source data came from on that first sentence in that paragraph, 38% of based on HUD's analysis.
Or HUD's definition, or
based on HUD's definition of cost burden, 38% of Sherwood's household were cost burdened.
Right.
Because that's a really hard number to say, because if your income level is different, then, you know, if you're making $30,000 and you spend 50% on your house, that doesn't leave margin for food or medical. But if you make $150,000 and you spend $50,000, that leaves you margin for groceries. So it's a very subjective number when they say 38%. You know, 30% of your income is a subjective statement when you have an income group that is a larger percentage has. I'm just not saying that people aren't cost burden. I'm just saying that depending on the income, you could be reading the numbers differently. So.
Well, and I agree with you, Gene. You know, kind of my issue with cost burden is that so much of it is subjective. So if we show, you know, that it's defined by HUD, you know, it's not the city, it's not something that we're determining necessarily. So.
Yes, thank you. All right, any more questions on that, Commissioner Kai?
No, I had something on the conclusions and recommendations, but I think that's more discussion as a commission as a whole. So I think that's more for later, but just not sure. So
yeah, I'm on the same page because I have a couple of discussions and potential edits, and I'm not sure how to incorporate it in how to be efficient in doing this. So let's take a couple of more questions and then we'll try and work through edit changes. Commissioner, I didn't see who came up next. Commissioner Bance? Oh, because you're higher up on the list. I didn't see top. Yeah, I didn't see who raise their hand first.
Yeah, actually, what you just said, that there's a discussion period later, might be more appropriate, but I do kind of a related question. I mean, it looks like a lot of the demand stuff here in this document, and I apologize if some of this has been covered before, because I know I've only been on here a short time. I'm sure you guys have hashed this thing around 6 ways from Sunday. But it looks like it's built largely off of models that come from Metro, quantitative predictive models of some kind. Every model has its assumptions and limitations that are built in there. And so, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting, like you showed a graphic about kind of the cycle of housing for families, and that's very conceptually sound. That makes a lot of sense. But that mix of people, families developing, that is a factor, it appears, in their model. But the most important factor in their model, of course, is income. And that's what's driving what their demand figures are. But no doubt Metro's model looks at their own data for our metro area in history, and some of that is we've limited land development, and so prices have gone up. And so if you're looking at data and you're looking at people who have a certain income level, maybe they're just happen to be in something they can afford that isn't what they really want, and thus your model now predicts that that's what they want, right? So you might have these income levels that really want something else, but that's what they're in. And so I'm just curious, I guess, maybe a question around that is, was there anything else considered in terms of evaluating what demand really is, in terms of what people desire to have, rather than just using these models that are kind of based off of the data that we do have, like surveys or anything like that kind of suggest here's what people really want in our community? I mean, it just seems to me that a 50% single family is a lot lower than what we have now. And I think probably a lot of people live here because it's kind of classic American, single family. And so I'm just kind of curious if that really seems like it kind of passes the smell test for the demand in our area. And I'm just thinking about these limitations. Yeah. So
that's a great question, Daniel. And so when we are looking at housing opportunities, we just have to allow the opportunity for single family attached and multifamily units, and we allow that now. We are currently meeting state statutes and Metro's code, for the different to allow these different types of housing to occur within the community. But when we are seeing when development happens on the ground, which is a little different than our theoretical trends that we see in this model. So when development actually happens on the ground here in Sherwood, we are seeing more single family detached housing being built. I just want to emphasize too that for our housing block of the comprehensive plan, we did do a housing survey. It was a housing preference choice survey. And you'll be going over that housing survey next month as part of your packet with the city council.
So,
And that actually speaks to another one of my questions where it says 50% opportunity for other items. Now, this might be kind of moot considering that Oregon law just changed last year as well. That doesn't allow us to require only single family, but is that kind of the same? It's just you can't just prohibit it, but developers can still build single family?
Right. So you allow it in your development code, but whether or not it gets built, you know.
Yeah. So that, Commissioner
That's
Vance,
a
that has been
market-driven decision, what gets built.
Yeah, so that has been a point of angst through several other both commission, council, and joint work sessions, that the state and Metro require us to allow for 50%, and originally it was 10% detached and 40% multifamily, I think the mix was.
Yes.
And as a commission, we said 50% isn't realistic, but even worse off is saying that 40% is multifamily. And the only concession we can get from the Eco Northwest consultants was that they could change it from 10 and 40 to 25 and 25, but we still have to have the opportunity for 50% of non-single family detached dwellings within our housing needs analysis. And it has an appearance of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. If all you bring into your community is higher density, then that is what you're going to be developing based on Metro guidelines and state requirements. So we have had a lot of conversation back and forth about the opportunity of 50% may not always vet out to be, but you are encouraging it by putting it into your housing needs analysis that way. So.
And I do want to point out that in the appendix where it talks about the different types of housing or the different types of residential housing being built in Sherwood, you know, over the past 15 years, we have definitely seen an increase, more of an increase in single family attached housing than multifamily housing. And I forget what table that is in, but it definitely does talk about that in the appendix.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have more, but I'm gonna take turns.
All right, Commissioner Whitehola, you have a question?
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to comment on Commissioner Kai's first comment, which was on the diversity of Sherwood, and for the comprehensive plan update on the culture and heritage page, there is an updated breakdown of the demographics inside of Sherwood. So that could be a good place to go for Erica if you want to grab that data.
I will, and I'll do a little comparative analysis, what we've seen, you know, over the past 20 years.
That's great. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. While we're still talking about single family detached, single family attached, and multifamily, as we go through in this process, you've mentioned the small lots and the cottages as other opportunities. How is the state going to classify those within our community? Are they going to qualify as part of our opportunity for multifamily or single family detached? There's, you know, they're single family, I mean, attached. They're single family detached, but when you do them under a different, they seem to have more of a multifamily feel.
So the cottage cluster development will be multifamily. You're having multiple units, you know, on one lot, so they could be condos, condominiumized, if they chose to be that way. The smaller detached homes on smaller lots, those would be classified as, you know, detached residential lots, or sorry, detached residential dwellings.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bantz, you had another question?
Yeah, I guess I was just curious. I mean, some of this data is a bit, it's not super old, but it's a little bit older now, and especially the start of this. And, things have changed a lot this year, big time, in many ways with the COVID hit, and offices are vacant everywhere. People are working from their homes. Commuting is down. And there's been somewhat of a flight to suburbs from downtowns and other places. So I guess I'm just trying to think about the relevancy of what's brought into some of the predictions in here. And I'm curious, has the state or Metro said anything about reevaluating their current assessment in light of these trends? I mean, some of it is probably temporary, but some of it may not be. And I'm just curious if any of that has been discussed at that level before we set a plan that is for the next 20 years.
So excellent question. Even though this H&A document, is for a 20-year planning period, it will get updated before the 20 years is over. Just to give you a little bit of background on some of the data in this report. So, and I know I talk about this in the staff report, this H&A was originally developed as part of the Sherwood West Preliminary Concept Plan in 2015. So some of this data we already know is, at least 5 years old. We expect to probably most likely update this H&A prior to asking for any UGB expansion in the future. So if we are looking at, at a possible UGB expansion in the next, 3 to 5 years, we'll have to update this document again. So I want to say that this document will get updated, sooner rather than later.
So is there a value in adding on page 49 of our packet? We have bullet points that are lists of questions that maybe we add a new bullet point that raises to the level of currency, that this is in 2020 and the time that this was being brought to adoption, the COVID-19 restrictions were in place, that travel to and from work, commuting, work from home, all were in play but not taken into consideration during this process. Because that's a pretty big factor, because how many businesses are going to modify their work permanently, their work from home options, and having that bullet point up at the front of the document may help give perspective to future readers.
We can definitely add a bullet in reference to COVID-19 and what we're seeing now.
And that this is a item that needs to be considered closely the next time the review's done, because the difference between 38% cost burden to 52% burden, because our community is transportation poor when it comes to infrastructure, and if that factor of people commuting back and forth changes the numbers significantly, it would be nice to point it out.
Well, that and what people look for in a dwelling. I mean, yes, on packet page number 52, it outlines at the top, here's what people look for: proximity to attractions, amenities, and access to public services. Okay, well, also today, it's now your home office, your workplace, and also, at least right now, our schools. So that's, people need more from their house than ever, at this point.
And let's also say internet infrastructure as well.
Yes, I agree with that.
And cell phone coverage.
Yes. Yeah, no longer can these internet providers wait 2 weeks till they send somebody out to fix your internet because it's critical infrastructure now more than just running Netflix. I agree with that.
So
Netflix is pretty critical.
So two additional points would be at the time of this document and adoption, the COVID-19 transportation changes and modifications to work commuting were not considered, and a second bullet point about housing types and housing needs with work at home options, homeschool, and internet and cellular infrastructure needing to be factored in the next review of this document. Those are really good points.
Does anybody want to take my kids, please?
Oh. I can't offer that.
I already have 4.
3 more won't hurt.
I'll hardly notice 2 more.
Yeah.
On page 46, Erica, the last sentence, I should have mentioned this when we were reviewing qualifying statements that Commissioner Kai had recommended. Last sentence on that page says, Sherwood will need to provide the opportunity for development of wider housing, including affordable low to moderate income households. And I had thought that it would be appropriate to clarify that is based on the new House bills, in addition to trends, because the House Bill 2001 is one of the driving factors that says we will provide for a variety of housing and affordable housing. So just
we can, another like additional clarifier in regards to House Bill 2001.
Correct. So then I had a couple more. I jump ahead to page 86. And this is just consistency. The table that's at the top, we go units, density, and then on the last one we swap it, density, units. Is it possible to fix the chart so that there's consistency in all 4 blocks of data?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the table right now. So we have dwelling units, derived density, density assumption, dwelling units. Then we have the last cell block, which is the difference in dwelling units and difference in density. So you want those 2 switched?
No, I don't want to call. I want, if you look at minimum density, it's units and density. Then the next one, it's units and density. And the 4th one is units and density in that order. But the 3rd block, which is the historic development, it's got them swapped. It has the units and density need to be swapped so they're in the same order every time.
I see.
It's just.
I see.
Just a little.
Yep.
Just. Beat Sherwood's future. My notes made a lot more sense when I was writing it earlier. Okay, I'm going to skip it because my note doesn't make sense right now. On page 92, I had mentioned this in our last go-around. Sherwood has a limited supply of land for moderate and higher density multifamily housing. And you specifically call out the HDR and the MDRH. But based on how our community has grown, MDRL is also an option that the community enjoys. And I think it would be, And it's as it's your slide 23 of 29 shows that all three of those zones are severely short, and it would be
right. So if you look on page 91, in the third bullet down, which says Sherwood has a deficit of land for housing, we definitely call out the medium density residential low on that page. So you want it reflected also in the last bullet on page 92.
Well, yeah, what I'd like is the last bullet on page 92 removed completely, but that is my that is, I know staff does not like the fact that we don't have a zone that covers 11 to 16, and I appreciate that we don't have it, but the city may choose to evaluate the need to add more density by adding another zone. But it's a may choose to evaluate, not add to it. So
yeah, and I thought we had already gone through a round of corrections on that topic the last time we were reviewing this. But maybe I'm misremembering.
So on that last bullet where we talk about with the city may choose to evaluate the need for that zone. Yeah. I mean, that's something that could be evaluated in the future.
But I'm not hearing, and maybe council needs to make a decision, but I'm not hearing there was a clamoring of people wanting to have a new zone with the higher density.
Well, I think when we start to look at our density and house build and our residential housing code update, I think some of that work that comes out of our residential housing code update might talk about the need for a planning commission to evaluate a new zone, or to allow for, certain densities, between, 11 to 16 dwelling units per acre, which is currently lacking.
So my challenge has been from the beginning that the push has been to either add a new zone to accommodate that, or increase the density in our medium density high to accommodate it, versus why don't we take our high density residential down to 11?
I don't think we're going to come up with an answer tonight, Jean, on this, because I think it really needs to be evaluated, and we need to have I think we need to have a better analysis of what this looks like on the ground.
Yep, and maybe those three options are listed in there.
Right.
And need for a zone that allows development to this density, which might include townhomes, apartments. This could include lowering the HDR standard to accommodate 11, or allowing a wider range instead of just always thinking we have to go more dense.
Right, and I think that's the point, is to allow a wider range of housing types. It doesn't mean you're going to have Yeah. Additional density. I like that.
If you allow your HDR to go down to 11, you're filling the gap, but in a manner that is more in the way that historically Sherwood has developed, which is at lower densities than 11 to 24. Or 16 to 24. And then the paragraph second up, it starts with MDRH. We were doing all the changes from instead of should to may choose. So the sentence says the city should evaluate the implications of changing development standards and just may choose. We were doing that in the document. May choose to.
May choose. Got it. Yep. I see the may choose in the second bullet.
Yeah,
from that one.
We just missed. Yeah.
And the third bullet is also may choose. So we just missed that one.
Yep. So I guess my other question was on page 87. It's kind of talking about development and what's happening. And I guess I'm just going to ask how House Bill 2001 is going to impact our redevelopment. And in your slideshow, it says not much because a lot of the community was built within, but that is
infill.
I understand that, but that'll, I know Woodhaven and large parts of our community has been recently developed, but we've got Washington Hill and other parts of our community that infill will impact. And I don't know how House Bill 2001 and the requirements of, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes in the Washington Hill area and other parts of the community that were developed prior to the 1990s would be negatively.
Right. And so what's really interesting about Sherwood, since we do have higher housing prices here in Sherwood, when you're looking at the redevelopment potential for the existing houses, sometimes it's not going to pencil out. So a lot of the time you won't see infill occurring just because the housing prices are higher.
Okay. Well, I guess I with House Bill 2001 is not addressed in this document at all. So I don't know if we need to add it as a bullet point or it's going to be taken care of by the next time we revisit this document.
It's definitely going to be taken care of the next time we revisit this document. We're going to have to make some general assumptions about House Bill 2001.
And as we address that, does that have any impact to how we craft the language in this document to help protect and maintain the livability of our community based on how our housing needs analysis, what our comprehensive plan, and what other code development we do at the time we are looking at House Bill 2001?
So in this next go around on the H&A document, we will take a look at House Bill 2001 and incorporate it into this document. I really want to emphasize the work that we're doing right now in updating our goals and policies for the housing block of the comp plan. That's really going to influence future actions on housing in Sherwood. So for example, one of our goals in Sherwood is to, ensure the livability of our housing stock in Sherwood, and to make sure it blends in, to make sure that new housing blends in with the existing housing stock. And so as we go through our residential housing needs project here this next year, and when we get to those design elements for residential housing, such as, for example, let's just say, landscaping or parking or lot coverage, we make sure that those elements, are being looked at and they're compatible with the existing neighborhoods in Sherwood. So any updates that we do to our code, we're just making sure that it's compatible.
Okay. Well, I know this document is going to be pointed to as we go through the comprehensive plan. It's going to be in a source document or an attachment to it, and it'll be referenced repeatedly, probably through the comprehensive plan update and through any zone change or code changes that we make. And so any factors that would play into it now to ensure that we are doing it right, that's just what I want to make sure we're getting at before we adopt this document.
Yeah, so, future zone changes will look at this document, to make findings that the needed, up zone of property, is needed for housing. I think we're doing all the right things in this document, and we'll continue to do all the right things through our residential housing code update as well. And a lot of these documents, policies, we want to make sure that they're all consistent with one another
Right.
as we move through this process. And it's good that we're doing this housing needs analysis now, and we're making sure that it's consistent with the goals and policies that we're formulating in our comp plan update, and then making sure that our goals and policies in our update really reflect our residential housing code update. It's how they all affect each other, going down the line. Right. And I know you've said the same thing before, Jean, in the past. It's kind of this cascade waterfall of how these plans and documents interplay with one another.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I want to make sure we're not missing any key components, because the information is old. It was prepared a while ago, and we were band-aiding together the last piece of this to get it approved so that we can proceed. And I just don't want to miss any key elements that have happened legislatively or just environmentally that would make this project better or make it fail. So
right. And I don't know what next year is going to bring. So like I said, this is really just it's a snapshot in time, and okay. And it will be reviewed again in the next couple of years.
Excellent. All right. Are there any other questions or edits or recommendations on the draft, or actually we're asking if we don't have an applicant, we're just rolling right into questions. And the staff has advised that there were no written public testimony received either prior to the 7-day notice or within the last 24 hours, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're combining the applicant wishing to rebut and the staff adding anything to address for questions at this time.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Just for clarification, can you give the process, just make sure we understand the process. We're going to make a recommendation?
Yes. So tonight we are asking for Planning Commission to make a recommendation for approval to adopt the housing needs analysis as a sub-element to the city's comprehensive plan. And as we move forward with the comprehensive plan update, the housing needs analysis will be transferred as a sub-element into our new comprehensive plan next spring.
So the comments that you received this evening from the commissioners about language change, do you need a motion to change those? Have you been doing track change? Do we need to continue and bring the hearing back so that we have a final version? Or do you?
I have made notes on those changes, and I think I have everything that I need to move forward with this document to City Council. I'm going to leave it up to Planning Commission whether or not you feel you want to take another look at the document.
So I would add Commissioner Vice Chair Kai.
Yeah, Jean, looking at what edits we have done, one thing that I was wondering, for the section of conclusions and recommendations, I know an ongoing concern has been what if, or say, a developer or land applicant, push this section as something that we, more so than something we could do, is something more that we had to do. And just wondering if the title of it, if it weren't conclusions and recommendations, if it were something that were softer, something like conclusions and recommended options, would that be possible for us to change that title to that? And then would we like that language better as a commission?
Conclusions and recommended
options.
Or recommended evaluation.
Something like that. I don't know. Like I like the word options because it implies it's optional. Whereas recommendations clearly are. I think that the understood definition is that they're simply recommendations. You can take them or leave, but it just sounds stronger versus options. So just thinking, if that's included in there, does that make us feel more comfortable with the language of that section?
It certainly makes me feel better because we're making recommended options.
Yeah. Or, and again, because from my understanding, it wasn't necessarily out of place for the consultant to make recommendations, but whether we as a commission agree with them or not is another thing. So, if it's understood that they're just simply options, and likewise, there are other options potentially available to us, as you brought up with the issue between the 11 to 16 units per acre. In the document, they're recommending looking at adding a new zone or pushing the lower limit higher. But that was my thought too, when you brought it up, was why couldn't the higher limit be brought lower? And again, that's just a good example of another potential option. So,
Erica, what's your does it need to say conclusion and recommendation versus conclusions and optional recommendations?
It could say conclusions and optional recommendation.
Is that how you said it, Commissioner Guy?
That would be fine. I worded it as,
or just options.
As options, I think would be even better. Conclusions and options, or I said recommended options, but I think options is just as good.
So the other members of the commission have any thoughts or opinions on that?
I think the recommended option sounds the best of the different wording choices we just tossed around.
Okay.
Yeah, I would concur.
I'm with Commissioner Whittle.
Conclusions and recommended options. All right. Thank you. Excellent. Does anybody else have any other comments regarding any of the suggested changes to the language that have already been submitted to Erica this evening? All right, hearing. So does any member of the commission have any questions regarding clarification on the testimony? And if there are no further questions, I can close the public testimony portion of this hearing. All right, hearing none, the public testimony of the hearing is now closed. So before we proceed, are there any further questions of the staff from the commission? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So, Erica, you have you're pretty comfortable with the edits contained with tonight's discussion, right?
Yes.
Okay. I move the Sherwood Planning Commission forward in a recommendation of approval to the Sherwood City Council for project LU 2020-18PA to adopt the Housing Needs Analysis 2019 through 2039 based on the applicant testimony, public testimony received, and the analysis, findings, and conditions in the staff report. With the edits contained in tonight's discussion.
I'll second.
Okay.
All right. It's been moved and seconded that we recommend approval of LU 2020-018PA Housing Needs Analysis 2019 through 2039 with the recommended edits. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we will take a roll call vote momentarily.
I guess my only comment is I hope the state and Metro kind of reevaluate this in light of current circumstances, the needs that they're saying that there are. I think that needs to be reassessed, but my only final comment. Or at least some of their laws that are now, I mean, they're kind of pressing the density thing, you know, and it's, I don't know, in light of current circumstances, it seems like it's worth reevaluating, but we're constrained by Oregon law. I get it.
Yes, very well said. Thank you. All right. Vice Chair Kai.
I vote yay.
Commissioner Widola.
Yeah.
Commissioner Giles.
I vote yes.
Commissioner Harsh.
Yay.
Commissioner Bance.
Yes.
And Chair Simpson, I vote yes. Motion has passed. And this, for the record, this is, do you have a date for the hearing that will be going to City Council?
We do, November 17th.
November 17th. I'm glad we didn't continue it. Very good. All right, we're moving on to new business, the North Sherwood Concept Plan.
So tonight, I just wanted to introduce to the Planning Commission a concept that has been put out there. A couple of months ago, a development team, came to the city and asked the question in regards to urban growth boundary expansion in this North Sherwood expansion area. And so I have a map, and let me share that with you. Sorry, I have to find it.
Well, Eric, talking, I just find you. So there's 3 ways to amend the urban growth boundary right now. One is what we're used to, which is the legislative process. There's a mid-cycle process that is new and never been used before, but it's going to be potentially looked at in 2021. And the other is what's called a major UGB amendment. And that's the process that the developer was talking to. Just so a little bit more context that it's different than the type of UGB amendment that you're used to. It's more similar to what the high school did. So now she found the map.
Is she frozen?
Yeah, I think she is frozen.
Oh boy, this is a good time to talk about internet infrastructure.
So great. I'm not sure exactly what she was planning on specifically saying, but I can point out where we're at while she's getting unfrozen, hopefully soon. So it's I think you will remember, and if you don't, I'll tell you, that there is urban reserves and rural reserves and the urban growth boundary. And basically, in the area north of Sherwood, a portion of that is essentially between our urban growth boundary, that's the red line, and the blue line is the urban reserve boundary. There are other little bits and pieces in other parts of the city. Obviously, Sherwood West is the biggest one that folks are probably aware of, where there's urban reserve. There's some areas south of Sherwood, south of the Brookman area, some areas south of the Tonkin employment area, and then some areas sort of throughout the northern portion of the city between the urban growth boundary and the floodplain, essentially. And so the area that we've been approached about is this area that's shown on the map, north of the Home Depot, and they're looking at both sides of 99W. I wish I knew more specifically how much detail she was going to be providing. So I'm sort of punting here a little bit, but I've been involved in this, so I feel pretty comfortable talking about it while she is, again, hopefully getting unfrozen. They approached us. We said, well, and Metro said as well, in order to do an urban growth boundary expansion application, you need to have a concept plan. Again, remember that the high school had a concept plan, the Sherwood West preliminary concept plan, and they actually had to make some modifications to that plan because what they were doing was not entirely consistent with the Sherwood West preliminary concept plan, but they did those amendments and applied to Metro for a UGB expansion, and Metro granted it. And essentially that's what the developer is doing here. And it's not just, they're representing all of these parcels, and they're kind of looking at a variety of things, primarily employment based. And staff is advising them. But oh, there, Erica, hey, you got unfrozen.
I'm muted. I think I froze and then I was kicked off the meeting.
Oh, well, luckily we had your map up, so I was able to give quite a bit of a background in orienting them on where we were. I shared with them, reminded them about the different types of UGB expansions and the urban reserve areas, and focused in on what we were talking about in the northern area. Reminded them that it's more similar to the high school project, and that we have advised the developers that they need to do a concept plan, and that's kind of where we're at right now, is they're working on a concept plan. And I'll turn it over to you because I didn't know exactly what you wanted to say.
No, that's great. So right now the development team, they are working on a concept plan, and they're also working on some public engagement activities for the community. And what that engagement is going going to look like. I do know that the city, we're going to host a project page for this concept plan, so people can come and visit the project page, learn more about the concept plan and how to get involved in this process as well. I don't know, Julia, if you had mentioned on November 17th again, we're going to be having the city council will be having a work session about this concept plan, and probably we'll be learning a lot more about this plan, what's been involved in developing it, how it's been analyzed, and also reviewing some of the public engagement opportunities that are going to be happening between now and November 17th.
And I just want to remind everybody or tell everybody, so the process just, so there needs to be a concept plan. Ultimately, council would need to accept or acknowledge this concept plan. It's not a comprehensive plan amendment or adoption. It's really just, yeah, that looks good. If Metro, and then they would apply to Metro for a UGB expansion. If Metro were to actually give them a major amendment, which frankly is a big if, then, and the UGB amendment, then come back to the city for comprehensive plan amendments and zoning being applied, annexation, then development. So a lot of pieces that would still need to be done. So this is really the very first step. And just a little bit of background too, just the developers, they're leading the effort. We're not really expending, other than some staff time, any city resources on this, and we've made that very clear to the developers. We are, I guess, advising, providing feedback, and then, like Erica said, we will, just because of just the nature of it, it's we need to have a work session. It's not they're not applying to us. So we're sort of hosting a project webpage, and we're facilitating the discussions with the Planning Commission and Council so that they could be out there. But at the end of the day, it's really up to Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council on kind of what happens with that. I'll also just sort of, because there's a lot happening on November 17th. So I want to kind of put out there what we're going to have, the joint work session with the council and the Planning Commission to discuss the housing element of the comp plan. And then we'll be discussing this to a certain extent, this concept plan. We'll also be sort of priming their works or their hearing, council's hearing on the HNA, and sort of beginning to have a very preliminary conversation potentially about the mid-cycle UGB ask, and kind of because all those things are all tied together. So it's going to be a pretty meaty work session and a pretty meaty council meeting for you guys. And so hopefully as many of you as possible can attend that joint work session, because it's going to be a real big one. So Erica, what else did you want to share about
I think that's it. I think we've covered everything. Thanks for stepping in.
Yeah. Any questions about
Commissioner Kai has a question.
Yeah, I had two questions on the north boundary adjustment. What those areas, do they have any type of zoning designation to them right now?
Can you show
they're
them
in the county, and they are, like, I'm not sure what EFU, they're not future development because they're not in the urban growth boundary. So there's some sort of county.
Do we have any indication from the developer what or how they're looking at developing? I mean, based on where it is, it seems it either be commercial or industrial, but I'm just curious.
They're looking at commercial / office.
Okay. Okay.
Can you put the map back up?
I can. Hold on one
Sorry.
second here.
Sorry.
Hopefully
Help me out of the
I don't
visual.
freeze.
But don't
And
go away.
one of the challenges is while the developer obviously has in mind what they want to do, it's not a land use application. There isn't zoning, and so part of our advice to them is you've got to look at everything. It's a concept plan, and at least evaluate why certain things might be off the table and why certain things might be on the table. I think given what's around there, what they're talking about probably makes sense, but they are still going to have to go through the actions of looking at all the possibilities and coming up with a concept plan that isn't just exactly what they want to do, but is a concept plan that fits into what the community would need. And that's where obviously the Planning Commission and Council will be able to chime in too.
And then Julie, I had a question on what you were talking about regarding that November 17th work session, with discussion being about a potential mid-cycle ask on UGB expansion. Is that potentially focusing again on Sherwood West?
Potentially, and we're planning on, and I fully talked with Joe about all the details, but we're not planning on having a conversation where we get direction on moving forward with an ask. What we're planning on doing is having a conversation to tee up the conversation to talk about having an ask, because we really we are having property owners in Sherwood West ask us, and we know that it is coming up soon. We're also going to be doing the Sherwood West relook, and so we just want to kind of put it out there for the council and allow the Planning Commission to listen in and potentially chime in, just to start that, like, hey, this is coming. Is this something that we're going to want to explore with a lot of energy or not? And just start that conversation.
So since it's going to kind of focus around that, have we reached out to the school district to see if they potentially might be able to have a representative there to because again, the schools issues were a heavy factor in what happened last time, and I imagine could and should still be in any future go around as well. So I think that would be helpful to have their input.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I will mention that to Joe Gall and share that. I think, again, it is still very preliminary, and what I would expect is either no, we don't even want to talk about it, or yeah, maybe we should continue talking about it, at which point we absolutely 100% will engage the school district. But I will certainly mention that to Joe and see if he, and I'm not sure of how much time and how much detail we're really going to be able to get into at the work session on that mid-cycle ask. Again, the hope was really just to tee it up to start having the conversation rather than just going. We don't want to go to council and just say, hey, so here's the area. Are we going to, go or no? Because there's a lot of pieces, and really just kind of an education on the process, and it's different than it was last time in terms of how much area we can ask for. So it's really going to be just a start of a conversation. That all said, yeah, obviously we can let the school district know that we are, broaching the conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julia.
On that, what's the timing for the relook? Because it seems like we're getting the cart in front of the horse if we try to do a mid-cycle ask before we complete the relook at the preliminary concept plan. What's the time frame for that?
Yeah, that's all part of the conversation that I think, and I think I might be getting ahead of a lot of things just by talking about this with you guys right now, but when we have the work session, we kind of need to lay all that out and lay all the timing out, because that is part of the, we are going to be doing the relook, and Erica can talk about the timing of that. But is it appropriate for us to be doing that right now? Because we might be getting the cart in front of the horse. But there might be very, thread the needle opportunity to do something, maybe, but we need to kind of lay that out for everybody to think about and provide input on. But Erica, do you want to talk quickly about the relook and the time frame for that?
Or if it's going to be part of the work session, that's fine. I've been involved with too many projects where we're trying to do two things at the same time, and then we're dovetailing, and like you said, we're going to thread the needle, and let's try and see if we can cram it all together, and then we get it done kind of sort of to the best that we can, and then we'll just redo it later because we can't do it quite right now, and we're only talking 1,400 acres, and like a huge part of our whole community, and it's I'm surprised to hear a mid-cycle look when we haven't done the relook.
Especially given the issues last time, Gene.
So just to, and I'm really giving you guys a huge preview on what we're going to talk about, but part of the mid-cycle ask is that we can only ask for what we specifically have identified as a need. So we are not going to be able to justify 1,400 acres. We're probably not even going to be able to justify 100 acres. So that is a difference. I mean, in terms of how much area we're talking about. Again, if we even want to go down that path, and I don't know if there's much of an appetite right now to do that. Oh, Erica, it just got really dark. The lights gone out. Looks like she's in a horror movie.
Oh, it's good.
First she freezes, and then she's in the dark. So the other piece of it is that what we've been advised from Metro is that it's really only for residential, with maybe a small amount of supporting employment land. And so part of the question is just, is there a desire to do a mid-cycle ask for residential? And so all of that kind of, we're going to lay out the size limitations, the timing issues, the relook timing, and all that, and then again start the conversation of do we want to have this conversation?
So can I maybe get Julie off the hot seat and go back to the map in front of us before I forget my other question, which is ODOT implications on this project. Has that been already part of the discussion as the process has been going through?
Yes. So I know that the development team has spoken to ODOT as part of this concept planning process. They're going to have to address, transportation and access, and any future, road developments.
Okay. Commissioner Vance.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about the expansion area boundary. It's kind of snakes along, you're going through fields and then some kind of forest and marsh. Like, you need a map and a machete to walk this thing.
It follows the floodplain. It follows the 100-year floodplain.
Okay. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Commissioner Kai, do you have another question?
No, I think I just forgot to unselect it, so.
Commissioner Vance, did you have another question or
I'm sorry, no. I did not unraise my hand.
I did not want to just assume that. So
thank you.
And Julia and Erica, thank you for allowing us to put you on the hot seat with the preview to the November 17th meeting.
Absolutely. And I don't mind being on the hot seat. I just want to make sure that, we're not we're getting, we haven't figured everything out. I guess part of it is that we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to present in the level of detail or non-detail that we're going to present in a way that's going to not completely confuse everybody. So part of it is just me. I'm like, I don't know if I'm, if this is too much, if this is too little, and we don't have it organized. And so that's.
Yep. And we have a thread we're going to pull on it if we can. So
yes.
Part of having a great commission is we have a lot of people that are already thinking steps ahead, so we can see where we're going to be walking. So that's great. All right. Is there any other? I guess staff has any other items to add before we move on to planning commissioner announcements? All right. Does any planning commissioner have any announcements that they need to? Yes, Commissioner Widola.
Well, after that conversation, I'm happy to announce I will not be at the November 17th Planning Commission meeting. I'll leave that up to all of you.
But you can watch it
November 16th to December 2nd. I'll be on vacation. So.
Okay.
I was going to say, you could watch it on YouTube, so you won't miss anything.
All right. Your hand's still raised, so we'll, oops, whoa. That was me. Everybody went away on my computer for just a moment. Don't panic. It's okay. Commissioner Giles.
And this is maybe just a nitpicking thing on the on our next discussion where we talk about the infrastructure. I do see the traditional things on that document, but I would love to get the internet infrastructure and cell phone infrastructure, essentially the digital infrastructure added as a item on that. And other than that, my background's in computer science. That's why it's near and dear to me, but I will push for it every time.
That's great. And you will see it in this next chapter on infrastructure. And we're throwing out some policy questions for the CAC and TAC to consider in regards to, smart cities and smart infrastructure technology.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, I have a question about smart traffic lights as well. I've seen that some national policies were being suggested, but it probably won't get passed in this Congress. But with some ideas for that, because there are much smarter traffic lights that might alleviate some of our problems. And I just, those are things that I feel like we should invest in. As we're growing and try to make the most out of kind of the limited area that we have to build roads. We can't always just keep building more wide roads. We've got to use what we have smarter. So yeah, that's a great part of the discussion for next time.
Excellent. All right. Any other announcements? Our next meeting is going to be November 10th, correct?
Correct.
All right. And do we have any hearings scheduled for the November 10th meeting?
We have 2 hearings scheduled on November 10th. We have the Denali, I forget the name of it, another Denali PUD off Road. It's the 3rd installment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have the Brookman Refinement Plan update and that hearing.
Okay. All right. And I haven't seen too many out in the community comments about the Brookman Refinement Plan. Have you guys done your public outreach so that we get engagement?
And
okay.
We sent out a trifle last week, and I think I believe I sent it to all planning commissioners as well. It's a trifle document that outlines the project and the proposed road alignments. Since we sent it out last Tuesday, about a week ago, and since that time, I have only spoken to 2 people who have called me to talk about the project.
All right. Well, at least we got 2 more than we had before, so hopefully they get their neighbors involved too. So, all right.
I have one more question.
Yes,
from
Commissioner.
me, just on planning, just on timing of these meetings. Did you say there was one on the November 17? Is that what I heard? Is that Or am I not hearing things right?
No, you heard that correctly. So we're going to have a joint meeting with City Council on November 17th. And I will send, you know, all the packet information out a week in advance, as well as the time for that work session meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and those are usually just it's the work session that usually starts at 6. Sometimes they start a little bit earlier, but usually at 6. And so you're usually done by 7 because that's when the regular business meeting starts. And occasionally, council will have joint meetings with various boards and committees, but probably more often the Planning Commission because of the type of work you guys do.
Right.
So
is that inclusive of other meetings, or is that 3 next month then? The 10th, the 17th, and the 24th.
Are you having the meeting on the 24th, Erica?
Yeah, and the 17th meeting, we're attending the Planning Commission. We're attending the City Council work session as an invited commission.
I see. So we're still on for the 10th and the 24th. Maybe I should just ask for any holiday changes for the next months.
I didn't. Are we?
So right now I don't have any. Right now I don't believe I have anything scheduled for the 24th, but I will let you know here within the next week and a half. I know that's a holiday week and people enjoy their holidays. So
there's one on December 22 as well, which I was curious about.
Yeah, if there's any way to not have if we have a required hearing, then I would say we need to proceed because we have 120-day ruling requirements on those. But if there's no hearing requirement, it would be awesome for the staff to reschedule it to before or after the meeting, before the meeting after. All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that point up. All right. If there's no other announcements, we will adjourn. I see no hand raises and no one yelling, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.